Hi, and welcome to this series of interviews with authors of the Concord Review. Since 1987, the Concord Review has published more than 1,300 exemplary history research papers by secondary students from 41 countries. The goals of TCR founder Will Fisu are to put these serious students' papers in the hands of their peers, encourage them to read more history, and inspire them to work on history research papers of their own. My name is Melodie, and I'm a TCR author published in the fall 2015 issue. Thanks, Vickram, for joining me. So if we could just get started by having you introduce yourself, that'd be great.
How's it going? My name is Vickram Shaw. I'm originally from Amarillo, Texas, and I wrote my paper about the Comanches.
Great. So could you tell me a bit about how you heard about TCR?
Of course, so I heard about TCR primarily through a web search, and I believe my high school history teacher had also heard of it. So kind of two channels that I heard about it through.
Mm-hmm. And how did you choose your topic?
So it was kind of a lot of different reasons, but growing up in Amarillo, the Comanches were that used to kind of be where they were. And so we had a lot of historical sites. There was a museum that had a lot of Comanche artifacts and Comanche history. And we're also along what's called the Quanah Parker Trail. And so Quanah Parker was a really fearless leader of the Comanche people. And there are a lot of big arrows at different historical sites through Texas, and Amarillo actually has one of them just like 5 minutes from where I lived. And so that was kind of my introduction to it. And then the more I read about the Comanche people, the more fascinated I became.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. And it's cool that you were able to pick a topic that was close to home too. So it must have been really great to be able to see primary sources, right? And like probably to weave that into your own writing as well. That's awesome. And if you could just tell us a bit about like what you learned that was interesting in your paper.
Yeah, of course. I think from my so the paper itself kind of talked about how the Comanche went really from these dominant forces on the horseback in transition to the reservation. And there was a couple reasons that I thought were, and I think a lot of historians also thought was one, the kind of increasing power of kind of the arms and the guns that they were facing. So it went, the Comanches were fighting with bow and arrows or different types of guns, whereas the white folks eventually started getting ammunition and getting guns that were just super, super powerful. And then also the Comanche lost their buffalo, which were such an important part of their lifestyle. Really everything, every part of the buffalo was utilized. And it was really it's so sad to see and to kind of hear these historical accounts of, I forget who said, but basically they would look out on the plains and they could see millions and hundreds of thousands of buffalo, more than they could count, to just 10 years later, 15 years later, there would be more hunters than buffalo. And so that was just a really kind of big example of how humans and mankind can really decimate an entire population of animals and then completely alter the way of life for a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, and then it was I think also really nice to see how resilient the Comanche people were transitioning from, this amazing lifestyle on the Great Plains to then to the reservation, which was, there were tons of challenges along the way, and still challenges that are present today. But they had a lot of resilience in that transition.
Mm. I wonder if you could also speak a bit more about how writing this paper and doing the research that you did informed your broader understanding of like American history or maybe even like global history, right? And whether it also helps you conceive the challenges that we as a country and as a world face today.
Oh, 100%. And I think one of the big things is that I wasn't necessarily taught about American Indian history in high school. So there was really this whole part of America's history that is kind of not, I guess ignored and not really talked about very much. And so, we always talk about, I don't know, things that seem more glorious, the Revolutionary War, things like that. Whereas really we should also be talking about American Indian history, a lot of the other events that happened that led America to where it is today. And these ones, they're more difficult to think about, to talk about, to learn about. But I think the only way America's history can be complete is if you include these, unideal, that these conquests that hurt people, that were essentially genocide. I think we're remiss to not include those in the teaching of America's history.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, thanks for those insights. I totally agree. I think that oftentimes textbooks for secondary students are written like as a series of really dramatic events, like as you were saying, right? Like revolution after revolution, because I feel like textbook writers think that that's what we need in order to understand the major political shifts. But then, as you're saying, like they miss lived experience. And in some ways, that's even more important than like what a few people in history have managed to like instigate, right? So yeah, I totally agree. And it's really great that you were able to achieve writing and communicating that lived experience through your paper. I wonder if you could also say a bit about what it was like for you to be published. Like, how did you find out? What was that moment like?
Yeah, that was really exciting. So I actually I found out when my history teacher brought me the letter saying that it had been published, and I was actually in a different class at the time. It was really exciting. I remember submitting it, and then kind of waited, and it was a really nice feeling to have it be published and know that other people would be able to read it and learn a bit more about the Comanche people.
Hmm. And so the secondary teacher was he also like involved in helping you write it or research it?
Yeah, so he was a history teacher, and he helped me edit it um, along the way. So after I kind of had the primary draft ready, he had a lot of really valuable insights to kind of help me be a little bit more critical about the primary and secondary sources I was reading, which was very super helpful.
That's great. And could you also speak a bit about maybe if there was another student's TCR paper that interested you or inspired you?
Yeah, so there's actually another paper about the Cherokee Nation, and the Cherokee Nation's kind of experiences with the Marshall Court, and their displacement into, I believe, Oklahoma, from Georgia and that region. So it was very interesting to read that paper and to learn about the experiences of another Native group. And so that was super helpful to see and very interesting to read. And then actually in college, I took an American Indian Law and Policy class, which was fascinating. And it kind of added another layer to the history I had looked at, which was primarily in the, I believe, 19th century, early 19th century and mid 19th century. Whereas this class was really a lot of 20th century, talking about how American Indians were navigating now this new life and trying to obtain sovereignty, and kind of the limited ways that our laws allow for that and our government allows for that.
Mm. So on the topic of college and the classes you took, I wonder if you could explain what you majored in college and whether your experience of writing the TCR paper, in some shape or form factored into your experience. And it sounds like it did definitely, like in terms of that class that you just mentioned.
Yeah. So I actually majored in, it's a long name. It's called molecular biophysics and biochemistry, but it's essentially just biochemistry. So very different from history. And I actually think, I mean, writing that paper in high school was instrumental um, in in that degree, because I think you kind of learn how important it is to be critical of primary sources, of secondary sources, of everything. Anything you read, anything you hear, it's important to not just accept it and to always understand that there's more under the hood, there's more layers of nuance. And I do kind of want to do research going forward. And I think having that foundation from high school, even if it was in a different discipline, such as history, and I think actually history lends itself really well to critical analysis when you don't necessarily have, the scientific knowledge of all, all the facts. History, if you can read critically, I think it gives you a good chance to practice, develop that skill of being able to look at something in front of you and say, okay, is this true? Maybe why is it not? What evidence is there for it, against it, all of that stuff. So I think long story short, it really did play a big part in my major decision and even career decisions.
Wow, that's really exciting. I like how you're able to really bridge those two worlds, and view research and thought as something that's really interdisciplinary, right? So I think that's great. And could you talk a bit about your next steps?
Yeah, so I'm at Baylor College of Medicine's MD PhD program. Um, I, yeah, I really like doing research. Again, think that this experience with the Concord Review was instrumental in that. Kind of having to sit down and write a really extensive, long research paper at that age really help. I mean, it really helps develop those critical thinking skills. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now, and I'm excited for the future.
That's great. All right, thank you so much for joining us.